The night was unusually cold for early spring in Ohio, 1989. A nurse named Linda Carter was finishing her shift at the small county hospital when she heard it. A faint, desperate cry cutting through the still air outside the emergency entrance. She rushed to the door, heart racing, and there she found a cardboard box, damp from the mist. Inside lay a baby girl, her face red from crying, wrapped in a worn blue blanket. A small note was tucked between the folds. "Please take care of her. She deserves a chance." Linda froze, her breath catching. She looked around, hoping to see someone, anyone, but the parking lot was empty. Just silence, the sound of rain, and the fragile heartbeat of the tiny life before her. The authorities searched for the parents for weeks, but no one came forward. The story of the abandoned baby made local headlines. Mystery newborn found at hospital doorstep. Linda, who had lost a child years before, couldn't bear the thought of the baby ending up in the system. She filled out the paperwork, attended every hearing, and within months, she was holding the child legally in her arms. She named her Laura. From that day on, Laura became the center of Linda's world. Their small home on Cedar Street was filled with laughter, bedtime stories, and the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. Laura grew up loved, confident, and endlessly curious. But sometimes when she caught her mother watching her with a certain sadness in her eyes, Laura would wonder if something was being left unsaid. She once asked, "Mom, where did I come from?" Linda smiled softly. "From love, sweetheart. That's all you need to know right now." Years passed. Laura became a bright, compassionate young woman, the kind of person who made others feel seen. Still, a quiet part of her heart ached with unanswered questions. Who had left her that night? Why? And why did her mother's eyes cloud over every time she asked? One evening, when Laura was 18, she came across an old newspaper clipping tucked between pages of a recipe book. The headline froze her. "Abandoned newborn found outside local hospital." The date matched her birthday. She confronted Linda, trembling. "Was that me?" Linda hesitated, her face pale. "Yes," she finally whispered. "You were that baby. But that's all I know, Laura." They never found anyone. The silence that followed lingered for years. Though Laura never stopped loving her, something fragile cracked between them, a small, invisible distance that neither could bridge. And yet, life moved on. Laura went to college, became a teacher in New York City, and built a quiet, steady life. She called her mother every week, sent photos, made plans for holidays. But the mystery of her beginning still whispered in the back of her mind. Then, in the spring of 2024, a phone call changed everything. Linda was gone. A sudden heart attack. The world seemed to tilt beneath Laura's feet. Within days, she was back in her childhood home, the same small house on Cedar Street, now silent and filled with ghosts. As she began to sort through her mother's things, grief hit her in unexpected waves. Every photograph, every letter, every trinket told a piece of Linda's life, and Laura's. But nothing could prepare her for what she was about to find next. Something Linda had kept hidden for 35 years. Because buried deep inside a dusty old photo album, a single envelope was waiting, with Laura's name written on it, in Linda's delicate handwriting. And inside that envelope lay a truth that would turn her entire world upside down. If you were in Laura's place, would you open the letter, or let the past stay buried? Tell us what you do in the comments. We read every single one. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next in Laura's unbelievable journey. Laura sat on the floor of her childhood living room, surrounded by boxes filled with photographs, Christmas ornaments, and the quiet weight of memories. The afternoon light streamed through the old lace curtains, casting golden dust across the wooden floor. Her hands trembled as she held the yellowed envelope. The paper was thin, fragile, as if it might crumble if she breathed too hard. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's, graceful, deliberate, and marked by tiny loops at the ends of each letter. Her throat tightened. "Why now, Mom?" she whispered. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she slid her finger beneath the flap and opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a faded Polaroid photograph. The picture showed a young woman, no more than 20, holding a baby in a hospital blanket. The woman's eyes were the same hazel green as Laura's. The letter began, "My dearest Laura, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to tell you the truth myself. I have carried this secret for 35 years, and it has weighed on me every single day. I know who your parents were, and I promised I would never tell." Laura's breath caught. The words seemed to pulse on the page. She kept reading, her heart pounding. "Your birth mother was a young woman named Margaret Reynolds. She worked at a diner near the hospital back then. She was kind, gentle, and terrified. She came to me the night you were born. She begged me to take care of you. She said she couldn't keep you safe. I wanted to find her later, to tell her you were okay. But something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe the promise, maybe both." The letter ended with one final line that made Laura's hands go numb. "If you ever need answers, find Margaret." She lived in a small town called Maple Hollow, Tennessee. Laura sat in stunned silence. Her mind raced, questions spinning, colliding. Why had her mother kept this from her? Who was Margaret running from? And why did she believe her baby wouldn't be safe? Tears blurred her vision as she held the photograph close. The woman's face felt hauntingly familiar. She could almost see herself in those features, the same jawline, the same dimple near the left cheek. She wanted to be angry at Linda for keeping the truth, but the words of the letter, "I have carried this secret for 35 years," and echoed with pain. It wasn't deceit. It was guilt. It was love, twisted by fear. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house seemed to whisper her name. She replayed memories of her childhood, the times Linda would sit by her bed long after she'd fallen asleep, the way she'd say, "Some truths are too heavy for small hearts." Now Laura understood. The next morning, she opened her laptop and typed Maple Hollow, Tennessee into the search bar. A small dot appeared on the map, a quiet rural town surrounded by forests and lakes, hours away from anything familiar. She didn't hesitate. She packed a small suitcase, tucked the letter and photograph inside, and locked the front door of the house one last time. As she drove away from Cedar Street, the radio played softly, and the world outside blurred into green and gold. She didn't know what she would find, or if she was ready to face it, but she knew this. For the first time in her life, the past was calling her by name, and she was finally ready to answer. The drive to Maple Hollow, Tennessee felt like moving backward through time. The highways gave way to winding rural roads lined with endless trees, barns, and faded billboards. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, and where secrets, once buried, stayed that way for generations. Laura's GPS lost signal 15 miles before the town limit, leaving her with nothing but instinct and the directions scribbled in Linda's old handwriting. Maple Hollow, off Route 29, near the old church. When she finally reached the small downtown square, it looked almost untouched by the years. A diner with a flickering neon sign, a hardware store that hadn't changed its window display since the 80s, a post office that smelled faintly of dust and paper. She parked in front of the diner, Maggie's Place, the name sending a shiver down her spine. Could it be? Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried bacon. A few locals sat at the counter, chatting in low voices. Behind it stood a woman in her late 50s wearing a faded blue apron and wiping down a coffee pot. Her auburn hair was streaked with gray, but her eyes were the same hazel green Laura had seen in the Polaroid. For a long moment, Laura just watched her, her heart pounding. Then she walked up to the counter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you Margaret Reynolds?" The woman froze. Slowly, she turned, her expression soft but wary. "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" Laura hesitated. The letter felt heavy in her bag, the truth pressing against her chest. "I think you might." Margaret's eyes searched her face, and something in her gaze shifted, confusion giving way to something like recognition. Her hands trembled. "Dear God," she whispered. "It can't be." They stood there, the diner silent around them, as if time itself had stopped. Laura took out the photograph and placed it on the counter. "This was you, wasn't it?" Margaret's knees seemed to give way. She reached for a chair and sat, covering her mouth with one hand. I thought you were gone, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. They told me you were gone. Laura's breath caught. Who told you that? Margaret shook her head, her voice breaking. Your father, and his family. She stopped herself, glancing around the diner. Not here. Please, come with me. They left through the back door and walked down a quiet path that led to a small house behind the diner. It was old but cozy, with a porch full of potted plants and the scent of lavender drifting through the air. Inside, Margaret poured 2 cups of tea with trembling hands. I was 20 when I had you, she began, staring into the steam. Your father was from a powerful family here in town. They didn't want us together. When I found out I was pregnant, he promised we'd run away. But when the time came, he never showed up. Tears rolled down her face. His family came for me. They said the baby would ruin everything. They made me sign papers. I was young, terrified, and they told me you hadn't survived the birth. Laura's chest tightened, her pulse pounding in her ears. So you thought I was dead? Margaret nodded, her hands shaking. I mourned you for years. I even held a funeral. For a child who was still alive. Laura could barely speak. Linda, she said you came to her. Margaret's eyes widened. I did. The night I gave birth, I escaped from the hospital. I left you there with the nurse because I couldn't let them take you. That nurse must have been Linda. The pieces were falling together. Love, loss, fear, all tangled in decades of silence. Laura reached across the table and took Margaret's hand. For a moment, neither spoke. It was as if 35 years of pain and distance dissolved in that fragile connection. But then Margaret's expression changed. A shadow crossed her face. There's something else you need to know, she whispered. Something I should have told you before. For a moment, Laura couldn't breathe. The way Margaret's voice trembled made her stomach twist with dread. What do you mean? Laura asked softly. Margaret looked down at her hands, her fingers tightening around the teacup. I didn't just lose you that night. I lost everything. And it wasn't just your father's family that took you from me, and it was him. Laura frowned. You mean, your father? Margaret said, her voice breaking. His name was William Hayes. He was older, from one of the richest families in Maple Hollow. When I got pregnant, he panicked. He said we'd run away, but instead, he made sure you disappeared. The words hit Laura like a physical blow. He took me. Margaret nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. His parents threatened to cut him off if anyone found out. They said the scandal would destroy them. He couldn't face that, so he told me you died in the hospital. But I never saw you. I only had his word. I wanted to believe him because I loved him. Laura's pulse raced. But if he was the one who arranged it, how did Linda end up with me? Margaret took a deep breath. That's the part I don't understand. I went back to the hospital weeks later, desperate to know the truth, but all the records were sealed. Then one night, a nurse called me from a payphone. She told me a baby had been found at the hospital door wrapped in a blue blanket. I knew it had to be you, but when I went there, the nurse had vanished. I was told no such baby existed. She looked up at Laura with eyes full of guilt. So I did the only thing I could do. I waited. Every year, on your birthday, I drove to that hospital and left a single white rose by the door. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I remember. Linda used to keep white roses in a vase every spring. She said they were her favorite. Margaret smiled through her tears. She must have known. She must have seen them too. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Finally, Laura spoke. Is he still alive? Margaret hesitated. Yes. He never left Maple Hollow. He still lives up on Hayes Hill, in that big white house overlooking the town. He's married now, has a family, 2 sons. The thought made Laura's chest tighten. Half-brothers she never knew existed. Margaret's voice softened. I wanted to go to him so many times, to scream at him, to ask why he lied. But every time I tried, I froze. I was afraid he'd deny everything. Afraid he'd take you from me again, even now. Laura looked out the window, her reflection merging with the darkening sky. "I need to see him," she said quietly. "I need to hear it from him." Margaret reached out, gripping her hand. "Please, Laura, be careful. The Hayes family doesn't like their secrets touched. They've spent decades keeping their image spotless." Laura nodded, her voice steady. "I don't care. I've spent my whole life not knowing who I am. That ends now." As night fell, Laura drove up the winding hill that led to the Hayes estate. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows glowing faintly in the dusk, like watchful eyes. She parked near the gate, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. For a long time she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the home of the man who had once held her fate in his hands. Finally, she stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath her shoes. The air smelled of pine and rain. She walked up to the door, her pulse echoing in her ears, and rang the bell. Moments later, the door opened, and there he was. Older now, with silver hair and tired eyes. But even before he spoke, Laura knew, because she could see it. The same shape of her nose, the same shade of green in his eyes. He froze, staring at her as if seeing a ghost. "Can I help you?" he asked carefully. Laura swallowed hard. "You already have," she said. 35 years ago. What would you say if you finally met the person who abandoned you?" William Hayes stood frozen in the doorway, the color draining from his face. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice trembling. Laura held his gaze, her heart hammering in her chest. "You know who I am," she said quietly. "My name is Laura Carter. I think I'm your daughter." For a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. William took a step back, his eyes wide, mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that refused to come. Finally, he whispered, "My God, you're her." Laura felt her throat tighten. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why did you take me from her?" He sank into a chair in the entryway, his hands trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he said, his voice breaking. "I was young, stupid, afraid. My parents, they controlled everything. They said if anyone found out about the pregnancy, I'd lose everything. My inheritance, my name, my future." He looked up at her, his eyes red. "They said they'd handle it. I thought they'd arrange for a private adoption, that you'd have a good life. But when they told me the baby didn't survive, I believed them. God help me, I believed them." Laura felt anger and sorrow crash inside her like waves. "You never checked? Never tried to find out what happened to your own child?" William buried his face in his hands. "I wanted to," he whispered. "But by the time I realized how wrong they were, it was too late. Everything was covered up. The hospital records, the papers, gone. My mother warned me never to speak of it again." He looked up, tears glistening in his eyes. "And then, years later, I saw a photo in the newspaper. A nurse holding an abandoned baby. You. I knew. I knew the moment I saw your eyes, but I couldn't say anything. I didn't even know where to start." Laura's voice shook. "So you let her raise me. You watched from afar while she did everything you couldn't." He nodded. "Linda was my friend. She was that nurse. She saved you when I couldn't. I asked her to protect you. And she did. She gave you a life I was too much of a coward to give." Laura's chest constricted. All those years, Linda's quiet sadness, her protective love, the white roses every spring. It all made sense now. "So that's why she never told me," Laura whispered. "She was keeping your promise." William nodded. "And hating me for it every day." Silence fell between them, the heavy kind that only comes after decades of pain. Finally, Laura said softly, "Margaret's alive. She's here, in town." William's eyes widened. "Margaret?" He exhaled shakily, his voice barely audible. "I thought I'd lost her forever." "She never stopped loving you," Laura said. "Even after everything. But she deserves to hear the truth too." William looked at her, then at the floor. For a moment, the proud man disappeared, leaving behind only an old soul weighed down by regret. "Tell her I never stopped loving her either," he said, his voice breaking. I just didn't have the courage to be the man she needed me to be. Laura stood there, tears spilling freely now. You still have time, she whispered. We all do. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the Tennessee hills, Laura returned to Margaret's small house. She found her sitting on the porch, watching the sky fade into shades of pink and gold. When Margaret saw her face, she knew. You found him, didn't you? Laura nodded. He told me everything. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. And? Laura smiled gently. He still loves you. For a long time, neither spoke. They just sat there, hand in hand, watching the stars appear one by one. The years of separation, of unanswered questions, of grief, all seemed to melt away in the quiet. Finally, Laura reached into her bag and pulled out Linda's letter, folding it carefully. She wanted me to find you, she said softly. She wanted me to know. Margaret's voice trembled. She gave me my daughter back. Laura nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and sorrow all at once. She gave me both my mothers. A breeze swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender, and for the first time, Laura felt whole. She had lost a past, but found a truth. She had lost a mother, but gained two. And in that quiet Tennessee evening, forgiveness became the bridge between what was broken and what could finally begin anew. Some truths hurt, but the pain of knowing is always lighter than the weight of wondering. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. What part of Laura's journey touched you the most? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can feel its message of love and forgiveness.